How can you stand there and preach on a stage every week, knowing that you're holding so many secrets?
Very difficult question.
Carl Lentz launched his first podcast episode with his wife, Laura, and opened up about everything that happened. Now, instead of me having to rehash all this for you guys, we're just going to have him do it. Now, before I get into this, I got to say that I left a comment that got me in trouble with a couple people. We're going to get to that in a second. But let me just give props to the B-Side team for putting this together. They did an amazing job. Shout out to Hector. Shout out to Tim Ross. Shout out to Malachi. Everybody over there. They did a really good job. This is shot well. This is edited well.
Quick context in case you're just clicking on this and you don't have any idea about my life, my wife Laura, the Lentz family. We have been out of the public life and sphere for a couple of years now. Actually, it's moving on about 4 years. And we went through some things as a family that some people know about, other people don't. But we're going to use everything we've been through to hopefully bring some new life and some new hope to people. And what you're going to see on these first couple episodes, especially this first one, you're going to see a couple that is healed and healing. And it hadn't been the case always for us. We haven't been at a place where we've been able to talk about our own life and our own pain, and we are now. So when you see us going through this story, we're looking to the future. Cannot wait to talk about other things, but it's irresponsible for us not to talk about what happened because it was so public, and I think it's fair to be able to open it up and allow people to take from it what they can. So in this first episode, we're gonna answer some questions that a lot of people have, like why has it taken us so long to talk? Why is Laura still married to me? Who's at fault? Yeah, we handle some of the real hard questions, and our hope with this whole thing is that you can look at what's happened in our life, and maybe you can recognize a little bit of your story in ours, and together we can all grow. So the future of the podcast is going to be me bringing on people that I love, that have changed my life, that have helped me heal, that are helping me heal. And that's the future. But right now, this is our story. So for those of you that are brand new to this, we used to be a ministry. I made some mistakes that cost us a lot, and we talk about it all. And now we're here. We're in this space, and I'm really excited about it.
That's good. That's good, right? That's good. That's a great introduction. The initial announcement was like this. So this is from his Instagram, right? And it's like super edgy, June 4th, a new chapter. And so everyone is like, wow, so on and so forth.
Showing New York,
right?
0604.
Right. When this came out, people are flooding my DMs because they're like, hey man, do you think Carl Lentz is starting a new church? And I was like, I hope not.
Yeah.
Right. He was over at Transformation Church. And when he announced that it was a podcast, I commented, what a relief. Right? Well, that was a relief.
Yeah.
And people were on my helmet.
Because it said, June 4th, my podcast Lights On is available.
Which is like...
Wow. That's awesome. You've been saying this for years.
I've been saying this for years. What have I been saying for years?
You have been saying if a lot of these megachurch pastors had the opportunity to build a YouTube or a podcast or anything of that sorts back in that time, they would have chosen that instead of being a teacher, instead of being a pastor,
a
with
lead
a pulpit,
pastor,
a lead pastor with a pulpit. And so, yeah, you've been kind of
been very consistent
with that.
And clearly, 73 other people felt and thought what I was thinking. Okay, so I wasn't the only one to be thinking, "Whew, glad he's not starting another church." Praise God for that. That's a massive W to me and anyone with a brain. Like, praise God that he's starting a podcast. That's awesome. So I don't understand what the big deal was, but some people push back. Nevertheless, the podcast came out. I watched it. I liked it.
Trauma.
I think there's a lot of really, really, really good stuff said. I think it's a massive cautionary tale. I think a lot of folks, like I really believe that had Carl had this outlet 15 years ago, yes, he wouldn't have been as famous as fast. Yes, he wouldn't have been as rich as fast, but it would have also prevented him from getting sucked up into the celebrity culture that is arguably one of the worst places to be if you've never dealt with your childhood sexual trauma. And I will say that there's been, myself included, so many of us that have found YouTube and podcasting that God has preserved and forced us to live a quieter, lower profile life without the responsibility of pastoring a church and the power and the allure and all of that comes along with that.
Yep.
So that's been my position. I said that on the Tim Ross podcast. That's neither here nor there. Let's get into the conversation and some really good things that were said. There's one thing that was said that I don't think was very helpful, but he said a lot of really good things in this podcast that I think is so necessary. Absolutely what he should have been doing all along, and this is the way you deal with it.
And you just were saying it's your fault that you put us in that
Yep.
position. Who is at fault? Who is at fault in this whole situation? You know, because there was things
Yeah.
thrown around in that space as well.
Yeah. I'm at fault. I'm at fault.
Amen. He could have easily said, well, I was sinned against as a child, and that made me the way I am.
It's way
and
more complex than just who's at fault.
He could have played victim. He didn't play victim. He owned it. I'm the one that's at fault. It's on me. Praise God. We need more of this. When we as men sin, despite the fact that we've been sinned against, and especially if it becomes a pattern, he doesn't get super deep, but this was clearly a pattern. These weren't one-off situations.
Yeah.
The only way to work through this is by owning it and just taking it on the chin.
My choices, that's my responsibility, and I take responsibility for it. I have wanted people to know when I get a chance to talk to them that I'm deeply sorry for what happened, and it's nobody else's responsibility. It's mine. We always have choice. We always have our own agency to do what we feel like we have to do. And I mismanaged my personal life. I hid things that I should not have hid. I lied about things I shouldn't have lied about. I was confused about who I was at times, didn't get any help for it. And the result was a whole lot of pain for a whole lot of people, which I will remain deeply sorry for the rest of my life. I don't live in the shame of it, but I'll never forget the impact that it had on people. And it's nobody else's fault. It's my fault. And I feel like when you're in a situation where you have made mistakes, you have two options. You could point out the window and try to find other people that are more guilty, as guilty, and you feel that need to deflect blame, or you look in the mirror. And I feel like we've done the best job we can. I know I have worked really hard at staying in the mirror. What did I do? What's my responsibility? What's my role in this? What part in the story did I play? And I am so heavy throughout it that I don't have a lot of time anymore to worry about other people's role in the story.
Looks like a movie, by the way.
Amazing.
The lighting, the set deck. This thing looks like a movie.
Shout out to Hector and the team.
Crushed it. This is phenomenal.
This looks really good, and they did a really good job on it.
Yeah.
What happened to our marriage and what happened to my platform, it was my fault and my responsibility, nobody else's. And that's just the truth. That's just the way that I see it. It's the way that I accept it. It's the way that I relate to it. And my job now is to make living amends. So as I've explained to you, when you wrong people and you hurt people and you offend people and you break the trust of people, if you're truly about owning what you did, you try to make amends. And I've done that where I can privately with the people that I feel like it's been appropriate. But when you're a public figure person and you've hurt people on a bigger scale, your whole life has to be a living amends. Yeah. And that's what I plan on doing. I can't, go up to every single person that was a part of our beautiful church and say, I'm sorry to you. I can't do it. It's not possible. But I can live a life of integrity and honesty that gives people reason to believe and gives people reason to have hope. And I cannot change people. I can't change their minds. Big revelation for me in this chapter. What I can do is live a life of integrity and honesty. And nobody cares about what my words are when it comes to that. I don't care. You don't care what my words are. But if you're truly repentant and you're sorry about something, your words need to be said, but it'll change the way you think. And when you change the way you think, it changes the way you act. That's true repentance. So I feel like we've got a couple years now of fruit of what we've been trying to do. But that's my goal. If people want to believe, if people want to follow, if people want to listen, that's their right. I can't change them. But what I can do is continue to recover, be who I feel like I'm called to be your husband, be a dad, and leave my life on display like it's always been. Say, if you watch the bad parts of it, well, the story's still continuing. Right. This is the story. Take it or leave it. This is who we are. And that's my goal, just to live a life of living amends. I really want to be able to say this to you in public because your reputation was damaged in public. You had nothing to do with my hidden sin and hidden habits and hidden addictions. You did not know what was going on with me. And I know there's been some confusing reports where people can try to piece something together and say, Laura, was she complicit? Did she know? And that's just not true. It's not our story. You didn't know anything about what I was doing because I became really proficient at making my life work despite a lot of pain. And there were times where you asked me questions to my face and I didn't give you honest answers. There were other times where I even tried to make your reality confused. And you're just a beautiful human being, and your character has never, ever been in question. There's never been a complaint about you. You are the most lovable person and the most loved person that I've ever known. You were the backbone of our church, the leader to so many people, and you did not deserve what I gave you, which is a scandal that's humiliating. You deserve better, and you've had to stand strong and watch people even start to try to bring you into stories that are so malicious and so evil, again, that's on me. It's not even on the liars. But I'm so sorry that it happened. I've apologized to you to the point you've told me to stop apologizing. But it's freeing. It feels really good for me to be able to say you had nothing to do with what I was doing. You didn't find out and then cover it up and try to keep it going. Like, you've never cared about that. You never.
That's heavy.
That's heavy. And let me just say this. In my opinion, Laura Lentz is the MVP in this situation. The fact that she stood by him, not in a way where when they talk about why she stood by him because she saw him doing the work. Like, she saw him getting help. And I think that, like, she's handled this so graciously and did a great job. So props to her for doing that. So when you're 30 and you get swept into being one of the most influential pastors in one of the most influential cities underneath one of the most influential movements, and I'm gonna say this caveat, you haven't dealt with actual issues in your childhood and you're in a dysfunctional church culture, it is the perfect storm to get these sort of recipes. And a lot of these guys end up, it's this avatar. Think about the guys that catch the most amount of flack, whether it's just Go Furtick, whoever, it's the same avatar. They planted a mega church at like 28, 29, 30. And then it blows up and you don't really know how to like do a TED Talk every Sunday, lead a staff, and then go do funerals and pastor people. Right? Like that's that. So like the position and the infrastructure and the culture within itself is not healthy, in my opinion. And I'm not saying Carl's a victim, but I'm saying what we've done in the Christian Pentecostal charismatic streams of Christianity is like, if you're charismatic, good looking, and you can talk, you're a lead pastor. What if there's less lead pastors? What if there's people that aren't lead pastors? What if there's people that like, they just got a teaching gift and that doesn't need to be them managing a 20,000 person congregation in New York City, Vice City, right? But like, I've been to Hillsong, New York. I've spent a lot of time in New York and I've been to Hillsong, New York. That was a culture of a lot of hype beast, superficial. I'm going to be one of the cool guys. Like that's it. And so you can like try to appeal to that by being that. But what you do is you lower the on-ramp and you create a culture of syncretism. You're now combining hype beast culture, cool guy, Kanye, Justin Bieber with like Jesus. And they're conflicting ideologies in many senses of the words. So what I'm not saying is he's a victim. This is going to sound crazy. I think this is an evangelical systemic issue for why there's so many Carl Lentzes and people like this. I don't think this is a one-off. I think it's the broken person with the specific gifting, the lack of character because he never dealt with his issues, platform beyond his capacity, and this is what you get. And it's not just him. There's a dozen guys out just like him. We have to do better at giving people other outlets in the church. We have to be better at equipping people to go be entrepreneurs. We have to be better at equipping people to go build businesses, to go into marketplace, to go be artists, to go do other things than you're good looking, you're tall, you're handsome, you could speak, boom, you're now leading a church. We're going to plant you out to go be a church. Like it's just not healthy. But there was one part that bugged me. And I think he got a little too clinical with his words here that I just didn't think was necessary because I just didn't see the point. I think Carl is, in my opinion, winning folks over, myself included, by being vulnerable and being humble and not being defensive. And he says this, and I'm just kind of like, did this need to be left in?
Just chop it out.
Just take this out.
Cared about a role like that, you would never stand for that. And it just got to the point where I think God had had enough. And I'm grateful for that as this horrible tragedy. I relate to it now as a moment in our story that I got saved again, that I got a chance to be free again, that I got a chance to be honest again. And not everybody gets a second chance.
Yeah.
I've taken mine, and I'm living in it, and I'm going to keep living in it. And that's my story. That's my encouragement for anybody going through it. Like, how do you get a second chance? Choose it and use it. And didn't even mean if that's a rhyme, but it did. And I think one thing that I read when it comes to fall that's interesting to me is every headline typically would say disgraced pastor, or pastor falls from grace, falls from grace, disgraced pastor. What's funny about that is, God bless those people, they don't understand grace, because you can't fall from grace. You fall into grace. So it didn't even make any sense to me. And I'm not mad at the tabloids who write, because they're, oh, disgraced pastor, disgraced. You don't understand what grace is. It's the opposite of grace. Grace is mercy and favor and forgiveness that you do not deserve, but God gives it to you anyway. So if anything, I fell into grace. And if people could stop writing headlines like that, I would appreciate it, because it's inaccurate. Disgraced pastor. I'm not a disgraced former pastor. I am a human being that made huge mistakes. Mine were public. Everybody got to see them. And now I'm a human being that's trying to rectify my life and make wrongs right and to live completely differently. But disgraced, I am not. I'm more filled with grace than I've ever been. Did I fall from grace? Absolutely not. I fell into it, and I'm really grateful for that. And if people feel disgraced, I understand it. What you could say what I did was disgraceful, maybe at times, sure, but I'm not disgraced, because we're forgiven, and I have been able to feel God's grace more than ever. I understand the thought, but I just wanted to get it out there. That doesn't fit me. You can keep writing that headline if you want, but that's not me. I don't identify as the disgraced former pastor. No, sir.
Carl, I don't identify as the disgraced pastor. That was not necessary. It was going so well. Look up the definition of disgrace while we're at it. It was going so well. I didn't understand the point of that. Having fallen from favor or a position of power or honor, they don't mean you're disgraced in that you lost the grace of God. It's not a theological statement. I know he wants to get myopic and like technical and clinical, but the actual word is fitting. You were in a position of high esteem, high power, high influence, and you fell from that position. And there was power involved, and there was honor, and there was disqualification and discredited. That's what that word means. So I think like playing on definitions was just something that I'm like, what was the point of that? Right? Like, what I don't get, and it's still like, it still breeds some of that like defensiveness. It still breeds some of that I was sinned against in the headlines. It's like, no, man.
Yeah.
No, like just let it rock. Like we don't need.
Keep it pushing.
Just keep it pushing. And we've all fallen short. We've all made mistakes. When I've been called out on whatever stupid little things I've done here, you just got to own it. I think the saved, again, perhaps he believes that, he wasn't walking with Jesus and wasn't saved for a season. I don't know. Right. And because she asks him about that later in the interview, she asked, like, how were you able to show up and keep preaching?
How do you feel? Like, do you think people can live with lies or covering up things? Because I know there's a lot of other people that have done the same thing and cover it up. Yeah. That's going to come out.
Definitely will come out. I think the grace and compassion that we have
Yes.
towards the people that we know that are dealing with the same thing, I'm sad because nobody looked at my situation and was like, that looks incredible.
Right, because of how it was handled.
People looked at our situation like, oh my gosh, if it happened to that guy like that, what's going to happen to me?
If it happened to him and you're just a normal dude with secrets in your closet and weird little things you have hidden, this should be a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Like what is in the dark will be brought to light. That's according to Jesus. Outside of the magnitude, this should be fear and trembling for all Christians. Like if you're sitting here living a double life and you got these little pockets of weird stuff you do, that is how I'm processing this personally.
In the church, I don't believe that happened. I know it didn't happen from my vantage point. I know a lot of guys were like, I'm going to go deeper in hiding, and I'm going to make sure that my wife is cool with this, and we're just going to gut this out in private because I do not want to lose my job. Right. I don't want to lose my reputation. I don't want to lose this. So I'm definitely going to be able to point at this guy and, have judgment about it. But the stuff that I'm going through, so that's a real part of this. And I think that happened and it is happening. I hope we can bring a little bit of light to that and help people because it's going to come out. If you build anything on a lie, it's going to fall eventually. And my story is that. We did a lot of great things. There was a lot of good things happening, but there was a lie in the foundation, in the fabric of who I was as a person, not even an incident. There was a lie about who I was. It's painful. The consequences are painful.
One thing I don't understand, how can you stand there and preach on a stage every week knowing that you're holding so many secrets, so many...
Such a good question. Just such a good question.
One only a wife can ask.
One only she could ask.
Sins,
props to her.
lies, all of that. Like how do you do that?
Very difficult question, and I understand it. The way I can articulate living a life where you have that kind of secrecy, it is torture for the person living, me, and it's torture for the people that are not in the know. I don't care who you are, what you've done. Nobody's created to live with lies. If anything, we tell a lie and we sit on it and we learn to live with it. It's like adapting to dysfunction. That's what it's like to live with a lie. And there's no burying a lie. We think that's what's happening. But I look at when I thought I was burying a lie and I was really digging my own grave. And that's a hard reality to face. But now, I know the power of honesty in a totally different way. And that's been a really powerful part of our healing and our journey, is being so honest where it's scary. But I don't know any other way. You told me something, if I have permission to share it, telepathically, can I have permission?
Sure.
Well, we were going through our checks like we do, and our marriage checks includes me asking you, how can I make you feel safer? How can I make
This
you
is
feel
beautiful right here.
comforted?
This was so hopeful right here. What he says about her is so cool.
And just a regular part of our vernacular. And the other day you told me, you said, I don't know. Let me think about it. You said, I don't remember what it was like to not trust you.
Wow.
And I tried to play it cool. I think I went outside and cried and told a bunch of my friends that are with me, hey, the Lord said this. But man, the dichotomy.
Yeah.
Wow.
To be at a place where I broke every amount of trust you had in me. And for a couple years later, for you to look at me and go, I got to dig for a reason. I don't remember what it's like to not trust you. It is an encouragement for people everywhere, because if you're going through something, it can just feel like there's no end in sight. And ours was like that. There were some very hard
100%.
seasons of you just not believing me, and you didn't have to. And it's still not a thing where I have earned the right to like live a certain way. The way our marriage, number 2, has worked is every day I got to show up for you.
That's what I was going to say. For me to say,
Yeah.
I can't remember not trusting you. That's a lot of work on your end, and it's a lot of, you show up every day doing the work. I don't take that lightly either. So that's a big deal. And I know a lot of men don't choose to do that.
So that's amazing. That's incredible. Props to her.
Yeah.
It makes me the application point for me. And sorry, like I always think of things like, what's the takeaway? And they talk about her healing. Like, really go listen to the full pod. It's really good. The application point for me is, and my therapist, Dr. Rudy asked me, my therapist this. He said, how are you doing with confession? I talk to you, right? Like I talk to you.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. So I think there's a quote that Kate from Newport Robbins told me. It's the Eastern Orthodox thing, and it's from one of the saints. Die before you die, so when you die, you don't die. Die before you die, so when you die, you don't die. Die to your flesh, so when you die eternally and you stand before God, you don't die. And I think there's also a degree of like, confess your sin before your sin gets a grip of you, to the point where you're forced to confess it before the world, or worse, like before your family and before the ones you don't want to hurt.
Eesh.
Like, confess your sin. And we in Protestant circles, unfortunately, do a poor job with confession. Like, confession is a practice in other streams of Christianity. They literally go to a guy, sit down, and confess their sins. And yes, they get told, do this many Hail Marys and whatever. When was the last time like you actually sat down and like confessed your sin to somebody? Like, really, like. And I'm not
I'll
talking
do it in
about,
a darker room to a random guy.
You'll do that? Yeah, it makes it easier.
They do make it easier, I gotta say.
Yeah. Shout out to them. So I think there's something to confession, but there's something to confession when it's just tiny confession.
Yeah.
When
totally.
it's like, my heart.
Hey, babe, I need to be honest. I was feeling pretty bitter the other day towards you, but I had to let it go.
Something like that, right?
It's like, oh, thank you for letting me know.
So I think there's something to that. I think there's something to developing a healthy outlet for confession. And I got one passage we're going to look at in a second. Play this last clip. This is where he asks her, why did she stay?
Why did you stay married to me? I think that I've watched you have to weather that storm. We've obviously hopped on and off social media, and the amount of people that have ridiculed you for staying with me, cursed you out for staying with me, anonymous text messages, once a cheater, always a cheater. You're brainwashed. You're this. Why would you stay with that man? And to watch you eat that, stomach it, stand on it, and give me an opportunity. Why did you do that? Because you had biblical grounds to leave me in every way, but you didn't. Why?
My journey isn't for everyone. I know that. So I did have every reason to leave.
Absolutely. You
Absolutely.
want to emphasize that again, because you've already said it. I'm kidding about that. No laughing, no fun.
Yeah. I stayed with you because I saw you doing the work. But firstly, backing all the way back, I remember the first time we sat on the phone, I think it was like the next day or that first week of, everything. We're on the phone with a therapist, and she was asking you questions about your childhood and some of the things that you had gone through and the trauma and the abuse. And I saw you break down like I'd never seen you break down, or anyone for that matter, but your physical reaction to what you were trying to explain, what had happened to you. And I saw that. And it wasn't an excuse for me. It wasn't like oh, poor thing. It just gave me context as to what torment you were going through in your own mind. And so that was one of the reasons I chose to stay, was seeing that and what that did to you, for the sake of my kids and for the sake of just, I don't know what it was, but I knew that I needed to stay to heal. Firstly, because I'd seen a lot of women go through this. And I was the person who would always say, I would never stay. And I know so many people say that, even in this situation, look at us and go, oh, she's crazy. I would never stay. I was one of those people. Like, I would have been like, get out of here. Like, my husband never did that. I'm out. But when you're in it, it's definitely a different thing. And
It's not
we had
so
older
binary.
kids.
Yeah.
We had older kids, but for me, I didn't want to be one of those women that had all this pent up like brokenness and hurt and things that I'd never, bitterness, and I just chose very early on in this situation to be like, I don't want to live with a broken, bitter heart. And so I did the work myself.
Well, can I interject?
Yeah.
When you said we chose to heal together, our verbiage is different. So by together,
Yes.
at the same time,
At the same
but
time.
we were so not together because we were told, this isn't going to work as a couple. In fact, the place that I went to get help said,
This
if you're
is
here
good
to
right
save
here.
your marriage, go somewhere else.
Right.
We're here to save your life.
Yeah.
And if you save your life, maybe your marriage will make it. But any man who comes to a place to get help just for his marriage, it doesn't work.
Well, I think even in our situation,
All right, that's good. So they talked about how they went through separate processes. He's going through his process. She's going through the process. Anyway, I want to show you guys one passage, which I think, believe it or not, I think is applicable to many of us. There's this idea of like status and power and leverage and influence, right? When you look at Jesus and when he's talking about greatness, he always says, this happens twice, at least twice, where he talks about those of you guys that want to be great must be the servant of them all. And in Christian circles, we talk about like servant leadership. Like you lead, like you're serving, but by leading, right? I don't know if like you should be leading to the point where everything in your life is leveraged for you. And I think, again, culture, right? Like what kind of cultures are we building in evangelical circles? And so I looked at this passage, it's one of my favorite passages. And in fact, you do, this 1 Thessalonians 4 says, and in fact, you do all have God's family throughout Macedonia, yet we urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more. So this is Apostle Paul writing to the church in Thessalonica. A lot of these folks are dealing with persecution, but Paul is asking them to be generous to the church of Macedonia, which is going through it financially. In that, they're expecting the return of Jesus. They're kind of living on edge because there's so much trauma. There's so much persecution, right? And so he's telling them like, hey, continue looking out for other people. Continue looking out for other churches. Do more. But check out verse 11. And make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your own hands. So the ambition here is to live a quiet life, to not have to be seen and not have to be front and center and not have to be the center of attention. And then you should mind your business and work with your own hands, just as we told you. So I think this idea of minding your business, working with your own hands, to me, this is how I have read it, and I would argue that these people were becoming nihilistic because they were expecting the return of Jesus. At least that's what the commentaries say. They're becoming nihilistic, returning to accept Jesus. So they're not being useful. They're not being useful. They're not contributing to their society. They're not contributing to their communities. And I think to me, this working with your own hands aspect is like, mind your own business, go lead a quiet life, mind your own business, but continue working so that you're not like hyper leveraging everything like you're some sort of CEO of some sort of Fortune 500 company, right? Like continue immersing yourself in the details of what you are here to do. So like if you're a pastor, continue shepherding and pastoring. Don't outsource all of that.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you are a video creator, I'm not above editing a video. I'm not above chopping down a stream. I'm not above the actual work. I will work with my own hands. I'm writing a book. I'm working with physically my own hands. I didn't get a ghostwriter.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's something to this principle of working with your own hands. This also is in the passage about the one who steals should steal no longer, but work with his own hands. Right? For if you don't work, you don't eat. And then it says, it says, mind your own business, so lead a quiet life, mind your own business, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders and so that you will not be dependent on anyone, right? And when you have useful skills, because you know how to work with your own hands, it's your daily life that wins the respect of outsiders. We want to win the respect of people we see a couple times a year, the person you want to make a good impression on. But it's your daily life that wins the respect of outsiders. It's our daily life, our day-to-day, mundane, when no one's looking, when no one's paying attention, and the things we do in quiet is what actually wins people over. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this conversation. Again, big props to B-side for putting this together. They did a great job. I'm excited to see the rest of this. But I thought it was overall a really, 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 really good conversation. Yeah, broke into 1,000 pieces, and then having to rebuild the vase and put it all back together. I think there's a lot of really, 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 really good aspects. And listen, the reality of it is like, I know some of you guys want to be like, oh, like he pulled the trauma card, childhood abuse card. Like, unless you've experienced the type of abuse that he's dealt with, I don't know if it's fair to dismiss those sorts of things, right? Like, when you were sinned against as a child sexually, it does something to your brain. And if you don't deal with it and you don't unpack it and you don't have safety to confess it and you don't have language to work through it, and your wife and your, like, and this is as someone that's gone through it, you can find yourself doing some utterly irrational things in environments that can be destructive to you. And I think that is what happened. Aspects, I had to deal with that in my own life and marriage 15 years ago, confessing to my wife my issues with porn. And so I think, like, let's not minimize that just because he's successful, good looking, pastor, tall. Like, just because he fits an avatar that you're uncomfortable with, that doesn't mean that, like, the issues he dealt with didn't negatively impact him, even to the aspects of perhaps his personality, right? Like, to the aspects of his personality. Oh, he's still narcissistic. He's still defensive, whatever. Like, all of those things have an impact on us. And so I'm not saying look the other way, or that's an excuse. I'm saying there's reasons why we sin the way we sin. Sometimes it's just out of flat out rebellion. Sometimes it's just flat out of convenience. But a lot of times it's because there's things that were done against us that we had no control over that did something to us. All right, let me know what you think about that in the comments section. And it would be remiss of me to not tell you about our biggest sale of the year, our Father's Day sale happening right now. You can get our brand new Bless God Prayer Journal at the cheapest price it's ever been, as well as some pretty fire priest, provider, protector launch that's perfect for the husband, the father, or the mentor in your life. So go to blessgod.shop and pick up something right now. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.